This is our 2019 Contemporary Issues in Criminal Justice Capstone Project, presented by Debbie Clarkson, Taylor Armstrong, and Veronica Bueno.
On December 21, 2018, President Trump signed the First Step Act. It promoted criminal justice reform. Some of the things within the act are risk and needs assessment systems, home confinement for low-risk prisoners, placing prisoners closer to family, modification of prison terms, and de-escalation training.
At the State of the Union, Matthew Charles was presented. He was the first prisoner to be released under the First Step Act. He served just 21 years of a 35-year sentence for selling crack cocaine. He then becomes President Trump's guest at the State of the Union.
But how many more inmates would truly have this opportunity? Issues to consider: discretion and those in charge of it, comprehensive staff training, de-escalation, budget changes, staffing, particularly understaffing, overcrowding, inmate-focused rehab, and re-entry programs. Discretion, staff morale, and de-escalation, presented by Debbie Clarkson.
Hi, my name is Debbie, and the portion of the bill I would like to discuss is the amount of discretion given to the Director of the Board of Prisons and the wardens. While to many this decision may seem a logical answer to leave the final decision-making to these individuals. However, subsequent to a little research, I located an investigation that leads me to believe that this much discretion left to these individuals could both be detrimental to agency credibility and the morale of the staff and prisoners. Following a January 2019 investigation by the Subcommittee on National Security, they discovered allegations of misconduct and retaliation on behalf of agency leadership, and this misconduct being tolerated or ignored altogether. Individuals deemed responsible for this misconduct were moved to other locations, awarded, promoted, or even allowed to retire with clean records and full benefits before discipline action occurred, or in some cases discipline was delayed so staff could retire unharmed. The investigation uncovered that the local internal affairs investigators may be to blame for the discrepancies in the discipline process, considering local management exercises major influence over the discipline process, leaving ample opportunity for misconduct, cover-ups, and retaliation. Considering the minute the investigator receives the investigative packet, management knows the details of the allegation, which includes the name of the accuser and subject of the allegation. Reports show whistleblowers experience retaliation within 1 week of filing the allegation. Then, when it comes to consequences for the allegation, officials receive promotions and rewards, while rank and file receive harsh punishments. The committee found that lack of independence and accountability breeds distrust and puts the Board of Prison employees at risk. Inmates know when there is a rift among employees and will exploit that to their benefit, especially if they know employees will get little support from management. That employee becomes a target. After concluding their investigation and making recommendations, the committee noted that the Board of Prisons discipline process has been the subject of concern for years. Most recently in 2004, when the Department of Justice OIG's office completed a review and found similar issues. Although some changes have been made, the culture ultimately remains the same. the wardens continue to enjoy influence over the discipline process, which are thwarted or inconsistent. Now, considering all of these inconsistencies in investigation and discipline, how can anyone take comfort in knowing that the programs and assessments as directed in the bill will be carried out effectively as ordered? For example, the wardens are to be trusted to distribute rewards and incentives as prisoners complete programs. But what happens when a warden decides to retaliate against a prisoner for any given reason? It is at the warden's discretion to remove rewards or incentives as fast as they earn them, as long as there's written documentation. If they retaliate against employees, what's to stop them from retaliating against inmates? It is also at the warden's discretion to transfer an inmate closer to home. This, too, could lead to difficulties for the inmate. These two directives seem to be events that should involve the corrections officers and counselors who deal with the inmates on a daily basis. This not only adds constructive input of the inmate's progress, but it boosts morale of the employees that their participation in the process matters. Further, if we are going to expect the employees of the Board of Prisons to deploy de-escalation techniques, they're going to need not only the respect of the inmates, but the respect of their co-workers to establish the trust and cooperation amongst each other. Considering the skills of de-escalation involve diffusing conflict verbally rather than resorting to physical confrontation. Verbal de-escalation requires everyone involved in the situation to remain calm, so there should not be any underlying tension among the staff of the Board of Prisons. That will affect the tone and approach to the situation. Lack of trust among staff can lead to staff talking over each other in these situations, which can do nothing to resolve the situation. It will just escalate the confusion and frustration, especially if the situation calls for a particular staff member to remove themselves from the area. This removal should not be seen as a bias against the employee to resolve the situation, or the inmates may use it in future conflicts. Then the final most important skill in verbal de-escalation is securing the safety of the staff and the inmates alike. So the team diffusing the situation should trust and be trained well enough that they do not present an aggressive posture, all the while watching for cues from the inmate of impending danger. This is why I find it vitally important that to have this bill be rolled out as directed, management of the Board of Prisons first needs to rebuild morale and trust so the employees feel safe and secure in their jobs, and further, so they feel like they are an important part of the program.
Budget and budget changes, presented by Taylor Armstrong. President Trump's budget proposal for the fiscal year 2019 for the Department of Justice was totaled to be around $28 billion in order to support the federal, state, local, and tribal agencies, as well as some funding going towards, quote, funding for security efforts to reduce violent crime, enforce the nation's immigration laws, combat the opioid epidemic, and continues its commitments to national security, quote, according to the Department of Justice's website. The Department of Justice also listed some of the areas of investment, which would be $295 million in program enhancements and transfers to fight the opioid crisis and support law enforcement safety. Additional resources will be later devoted to combating transnational criminal organizations known for supplying illicit drugs to the United States. $65.9 million in immigration-related program enhancements to enhance border security and immigration enforcement. These investments will also improve our ability to conduct immigration hearings to help combat illegal immigration. $109.2 million to strengthen federal law enforcement's ability to reduce violent crime. $10 million for the Bureau of Prisons Apprenticeship Program, giving inmates the necessary skills for successful post-incarceration employment. $13 million for the Criminal Division to support Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, or the MLAT, reform, and $3.9 billion in discretionary and mandatory funding for federal grants to state, local, and tribal law enforcement and victims of crime. To ensure greater safety for law enforcement personnel and the people they serve. Critical programs aimed at protecting the life and safety of state and local law enforcement personnel, including the Public Safety Partnership Program and the Project Safe Neighborhood Program, according to the DOJ website. Now for budget changes. According to the National Immigration Forum, the budget also included funding for the following departments. The U.S. Marshals Service would be giving $2.8 billion, no change from the previous fiscal year. The U.S. Attorneys would be given $2.1 billion, no change from the previous fiscal year. The Civil Division would be given $284.5 million, which would be a 2.5% decrease from the previous year. This office also includes the Office of Immigration Litigation and the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. The Federal Bureau of Prisons would be given $7.1 billion, no change from the previous year. The Office of Justice Programs discretionary funding would be given $1.45 billion, which is an 11.5% increase from the previous year. Victims of Trafficking Grant Program would be given $45 million, no change from the previous year. And the Office on Violence Against Women would be given $505 million, including $485.5 million for grants, which is a 5% increase. And the Executive Office of Immigration Review would be given $563.4 million, which is a 13% increase from the previous year. Now, for the programs that have been eliminated, the first one would be the Community Relations Service, which, quote, provided assistance to state and local communities in the prevention and resolution of tension, violence, and civil disorders relating to actual or perceived discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin. It works with communities to prevent and respond to hate crimes and address tension associated with alleged discrimination, quote, according to the National Immigration Forum. The forum also states that the administration is also proposing to move the functions of the Community Relations Service into the Civil Rights Division, according to the forum. Now, the next program would be the Community-Oriented Policing Services, or COPS, which the mission of COPS is to advance public safety through the practice of community policing. Now, this department and their hiring services department would be eliminated, but there is a proposal to move the functions of both departments to the Office of Justice Programs, according to the National Immigration Forum. Now, there is a way that states can save money on criminal justice reform. The American Civil Liberties Union wrote an article back in 2012 on how states can save money by implementing criminal justice reforms. They were proven to protect the public and produce significant cost savings. Several of these reforms, such as offering effective addiction treatment to more people convicted of drug-related crimes instead of incarcerating them, and turning the sanctions other than prison time for people who violate the technical conditions of their parole, have drove crime rates down to the lowest in years for states that have implemented them. There are still states, though, that haven't created such reforms, according to the American Civil Liberties Union. This would be because the official state estimates or fiscal notes often don't have enough information to produce good decision-making, so reforms are not passed. So by providing exceptional fiscal notes for legislators, states would hopefully be able to pass criminal justice reforms that would decrease the incarceration rate and the cost of spending.
staffing, prison overcrowding, and inmate-focused rehabilitation and reentry, presented by Veronica Bueno. Overcrowding in prisons has become a big issue in today's society. We are running out of room and funding to keep people in jail, let alone to add to the imprisoned population. I'm going to tell you about some of the ways we could improve our system so that overcrowding will not be as big of an issue, but first, here are 2 quick facts about overcrowding. According to penalreform.org, 22% of national prisons hold more than double their capacity. In most prisons, the prisoners do not even have the amount recommended minimum space. Of those prisoners, how many do you think are drug offenders that are serving more than 1, 2, or even 5 years? One of the biggest ways to prevent overcrowding would be to send fewer people to prison for drug charges and lessen the sentencing for the ones that do go for drugs. Time off for participating in drug rehabilitation programs would benefit the inmate and the prison as well. Many prisoners can receive good time, but expanding that to where even more are capable would help overcrowding. Another big aspect of overcrowding is recidivism. Criminals that keep coming back are not getting the help that they need. As stated on justice.gov, identifying a criminal's individual needs can reduce their recidivism rate. By identifying the inmate's criminal history, substance abuse, and education level, the institution can use those factors to provide the best care for them and to monitor their progress. Research has proven that 43% of inmates that are involved in educational programs have low recidivism rates. Although the prisoner would still be in the facility in the first place, after they get out, they would free up that space. Every dollar spent on an education program for an inmate would save $4 or $5 on the cost of reincarceration. Within the educational programs, inmates should also learn important job skills. Inmates are 24% less likely to recidivate if they are working in the prison industries and 14% more likely to be employed after being released from prison. Getting a job after being released from prison has known to be one of the hardest aspects of transitioning back into society. These programs would help them because they would be similar to the opportunities available to them outside of the prison. Speaking of the outside world, it would help inmates if the prison helped them maintain family ties as well. Being able to stay close with their families reduces recidivism, improves their likelihood of finding and keeping a job after being released, and helps the family members while being separated from their loved ones. This could be done by video conferencing calls, engaging children of incarcerated parents in youth programs, and educating inmates on how to keep in better contact with their families. Another way to help the overcrowding issue comes from NPR.org. It states that an inmate's behavior will change when they change the way that they think. Cognitive treatment programs can reduce recidivism rates by 25 to 35%. The methods I have stated so far should not be in place of imprisonment, but added to the process so that the impact is greater. This is giving them as much freedom as possible back. It is their choice to change the way that they think. The prison would just be encouraging it instead of confining them and telling them what to do all the time. Treating them with respect will have more of an impact than people realize. An article in USA Today said that corrections officers should be trained to help reform inmates so that they do not come back, rather than just being trained to maintain the facility and boss inmates around. Prisons should be looked at as behavioral change institutions rather than a warehouse for wrongdoers. Training the employees of the prison on topics like these will not only benefit the prisoner but also benefit the officers' relations with the prisoners and could make the facility operate smoother. The corrections part of the criminal justice system must become a science. Some research has shown that therapeutic or a human service-like approach is likely to reduce recidivism by helping the inmates establish skills they need to overcome barriers that push them to commit the crimes in the first place. Work release programs are helpful as well when it comes to recidivism. Most prisons have work release, but expanding the program to more inmates would be beneficial. For those of you who do not know, every work release program is a little different, so I can only speak on behalf of the Wichita area. But the idea is to help inmates transition from prison life back into the community. This program allows trusted inmates to work outside of the prison and in the community. Some examples of the types of jobs they might get are automotive repair, building maintenance, food service, electronics, printing, carpentry, landscaping, plumbing, and many more. They must maintain full-time employment and learn money management skills. They learn these skills by having to pay a room and board fee, transportation expenses, court costs, restitution, dependent support, and outstanding debts. They pay their medical and dental expenses and the maintenance of their room. These inmates must also save part of their money they earn before they're released. Everything that I've said so far would improve our overcrowding problem here in the U.S. It may not ever be fixed completely, but by starting these programs, we could definitely make a significant impact.